I couldn't get a job anywhere, she continued, voice shaking. Not even babysitting. Eventually, I stopped trying. I moved here, took what I could. Shelters, cleaning jobs, this cafe. She smiled, but there was no joy behind it. Only survival. I thought you knew. That maybe you agreed with them. No, Tyler said, standing abruptly, fists clenched. No, I didn't know any of that. I swear to you. He could barely contain the fury rising in his chest. His father had always preached loyalty and integrity, yet behind the scenes they had smeared the reputation of the woman who raised their only son. Why? Because she was a liability? Because she had seen too much of what they never wanted exposed? Tyler needed answers, and he knew where to find them. That night, he returned to Blackwell Enterprises, not as the CEO, but as a son digging through the rot his family left behind. In the company archives, he began to uncover what truly happened. Old emails, memo trails, internal communications between Grayson and his parents. It was all there, hidden beneath layers of legal jargon and polite corruption. What he found shattered him. Not only had Grayson blacklisted Evelyn with lies, but he had been paid to do it. A calculated move to ensure she'd never speak to Tyler again. They called her a loose end, a sentimental threat. Then he found something worse, a scanned letter from his mother. Cold, precise, instructing Grayson to ensure Harper never contacts Tyler. Pay whatever it takes to keep her silent. Attached was a transaction record, $50,000, a line item labeled Harper Settlement. Tyler dropped the papers. His chest tightened. They hadn't just fired Evelyn. They had tried to erase her completely. And all these years, he had been continuing their legacy, building on top of the bones of their cruelty, blind to the truth. But not anymore. Tyler sat. In his penthouse that night, the city lights flickering below like 1,000 judgments. The document still burned in his hands. The $50,000 payment his mother had authorized. The attempt to buy Evelyn's silence and wipe her from his life. But something didn't sit right. He remembered Evelyn's face in that booth. The hurt, yes, but also the pride, the quiet fire in her eyes. That wasn't someone who took hush money. That was someone who had endured too much to ever sell her dignity. The next evening, he went back to the cafe. Rain dotted the windows. As he stepped inside, the bell above the door jingling like a distant echo of a simpler time. Evelyn saw him and approached slowly, drying her hands on her apron. Her expression was unreadable. "Can we talk?" he asked. She nodded, and once again they found themselves in that corner booth, where truths seemed harder to escape. Tyler leaned in, his voice low, heart pounding. "Did my family pay you to stay away from me?" Evelyn blinked, startled. "What?" "I found a record. $50,000. A settlement. My mother's letter. Grayson executed it. Was that true?" Her face paled. She sat back like the air had been knocked from her lungs. Then she shook her head slowly, eyes gleaming. "Tyler, I never took a cent." He froze. "You didn't?" "No." Her voice was firmer now. "Grayson came to me a year after they fired me, brought a check, told me if I signed I could never contact you again, that it was in your best interest. I tore it up in front of him." Tyler's fists clenched. "He threatened me," Evelyn continued. "Said if I told anyone they'd destroy what little I had left. I didn't care, but I didn't want you hating them because of me. You had already lost so much. I wasn't going to take your memories, too." Tyler looked down, overwhelmed by a storm of guilt and rage. Grayson had pocketed the money, forged Evelyn's silence, built a wall between them with lies. And Tyler? He had walked through life blind, stepping over the damage they left behind, calling it success. "I'm done," he said, voice shaking. Done pretending their legacy means anything. I don't want to inherit their cruelty. Evelyn reached across the table, placing her weathered hand over his. You don't have to be them, she whispered. You never did. That night, Tyler went home and drafted a plan. Not a business strategy, but a reckoning. One that would rip through every corner of the empire his parents left him. Because fixing this wouldn't be about money. It would be about truth, about purpose, about building something they could never corrupt. Something born not in marble boardrooms, but in a corner booth with peeling paint and the quiet grace of a woman who refused to be broken. Tyler didn't wait. He was done with apologies spoken, in shadows. It was time to bring everything into the light. The following morning, he called an emergency board meeting at Blackwell Enterprises. Executives, shareholders, and legal counsel filled the room, unaware that the empire they built was about to be shaken to its core. He presented the files, Grayson's correspondence, the blacklisting memos, and the attempted hush money. The room fell silent as he laid it all bare, including his own failures. He didn't sugarcoat anything. This wasn't a PR play. It was a confession. Grayson was terminated immediately. Internal investigations were launched into every corner of the company. And for the first time in decades, the Blackwell name stood for something other than silent cruelty. But Tyler wasn't finished. He had spent too long letting others define his legacy. Now he was going to build his own, with Evelyn's name at the center of it. He called her that evening, asking her to meet him, not at the cafe, but at the top floor of his corporate headquarters. She hesitated, but curiosity outweighed caution. When she arrived, he greeted her with a quiet smile and led her into a sleek, glass-walled office overlooking the city. A white folder sat on the table. This, he said, sliding it toward her, is Harper's Hope. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. What is it? A foundation, Tyler explained, funded by my personal wealth. Its purpose is simple. Give. A second chance to people the system tries to erase. Nannies, janitors, workers, anyone who was used, discarded, or silenced. She looked stunned. And you want me to run it, he said without hesitation. Not as a token figure. I want you to shape it, build it, make it yours. Evelyn laughed softly, almost in disbelief. Tyler, I have no degree, no resume, no title. You have more than any of that, he said. You have experience. You have heart. You know what it means to be overlooked and how to help people rise from it. She fell silent, turning over the folder in her hands. I don't want a fancy office, she warned. No corner suite, no red carpet. You'll get a desk, a team, and total freedom. No more, no less. She smiled, the kind of smile that melted years of scars. Then I'm in, but only if we do it right. We will, over the next few months. Harper's Hope grew faster than anyone expected. Evelyn assembled a small but fierce team. Former social workers, displaced single parents, retired teachers. People who had lived through hardship and wanted to lift others from it. They launched programs for retraining workers, legal aid clinics for those blacklisted, microloans for women who'd been forced out of the workforce. And Tyler? He stayed, close, not to lead, but to learn. He sold off divisions of Blackwell Enterprises tied to exploitative contracts, redirected profits into the foundation. Critics called him reckless. Investors screamed. Stocks dipped. But Tyler didn't flinch, because for the first time he wasn't protecting wealth. He was protecting people, and Evelyn, once silenced, once erased, was now the face of something louder than money ever could be. Hope. Harper's Hope became more than a foundation. It became a movement. News outlets picked up the story of the billionaire who stepped down from his ivory tower to honor the woman who raised him. It wasn't a publicity stunt, and people felt that. Because this time, Tyler. Blackwell wasn't building empires, he was rebuilding lives. One by one, stories surfaced. A janitor who got back on his feet after being falsely accused. A single mother who found stable housing. A retired nurse who finally received the pension she'd been denied for years. Evelyn oversaw every detail, not from a boardroom, but from a modest office filled with handwritten notes and Polaroids of the people she'd helped. Each face on her wall wasn't a statistic. It was a life reclaimed. Tyler visited often, always quietly. Sometimes he joined Evelyn in planning sessions. Other times he sat in the waiting area, watching as young volunteers buzzed around her like bees around a queen. She had found her rhythm, again. But not as a caretaker for someone else's child. Now, she was the architect of something truly her own, and Tyler? He felt something he hadn't in years, clarity. He had lived so long in the shadow of his parents' ambition, trying to become the perfect blend of ruthless and brilliant. But Evelyn showed him that greatness didn't come from control. It came from compassion. It came from choosing to do the right thing, even when no one is watching. Then, on a crisp autumn morning, they stood together at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for Harper's Hope's first community center. Crowds gathered, kids laughed, journalists took photos. But Tyler didn't care about the headlines. He cared about Evelyn, standing beside him, eyes brimming with tears not of pain, but of pride. She cut the ribbon with steady hands. The crowd, erupting in applause. He leaned over and whispered, "You built this." She turned to him and smiled. "No, we built this." And she was right. This was never about just fixing her life. It was about changing what power meant. It was about redefining legacy, not through profit margins, but through second chances. What if the only person who ever truly saw you, who cared for you when even your own parents didn't, simply vanished from your life? And what if you found them years later, not thriving, but struggling to survive in a world far from the one you live in? Tyler Blackwell was the definition of success. At just 32, he stood at the helm of a business empire that spanned tech, real estate, and global investments. His name topped Forbes lists, his face graced magazine covers, and boardrooms fell silent when he entered. But behind the suits and skyscrapers was a man disconnected from his roots, a man raised by ghosts in marble hallways. His parents, Richard and Celeste Blackwell, were powerhouses who built their fortune from nothing. But they paid for it with silence, with distance, with a son they barely knew. Tyler grew up in a mansion large enough to get lost in, yet no place ever felt like home. He stopped asking where his parents were, stopped waiting for bedtime kisses or family dinners, until Evelyn Harper arrived. She wasn't just another nanny. She was sunshine in human form, soft-spoken, warm, and unshakably kind. She didn't see the future CEO. She saw the lonely child. She read to him when he couldn't sleep. She taught him to ride a bike, to tie his shoes, to believe in a world beyond marble walls. But when Tyler turned 18, everything changed. A tragedy struck. His parents died in a plane crash, and with that, Evelyn disappeared. He told himself she was fine, that she'd moved on, that she was just another chapter in a life too busy to look back. He was wrong. What he didn't know was that Evelyn hadn't just left. She had been erased, and when fate brought them face to face again, it wasn't in a way he ever expected. Tyler had spent most of his life being surrounded by people who admired his power but never truly cared about the man behind it. But back then, when he was just a lonely child, Evelyn Harper had been everything his parents were not. Present, warm, human. She was 28 when she came to work for the Blackwells, a woman with soft hazel eyes, a laugh that made the cold house feel alive, and a presence that somehow softened even the most intimidating marble halls. Unlike the other nannies, Evelyn didn't treat her job like a checklist. She didn't clock out emotionally at 5. She was there for Tyler in every way that mattered. She didn't flinch when he cried. She didn't dismiss his questions. She knelt to his level, held his hand when he was scared, and reminded him every single day that he was more than an heir, that he was still a child, still allowed to feel. To the world, Tyler was a prodigy in training, the future of the Blackwell name. But to Evelyn, he was just Tyler, just a boy with a chipped tooth and big questions about why his parents never came home. She snuck him cookies when the nutritionist wasn't looking. She helped him pick birthday gifts for the very parents who never showed up to the party. And when nightmares kept him up at night, it was Evelyn who stayed until he fell back asleep, her hand resting gently on his back like an anchor to a world. That made sense. She once told him, "Real strength isn't in your bank account, Tyler." Then she pressed a hand against his chest. "It's here, in your heart." Tyler carried those words with him through prep school, Ivy League courses, business deals, and boardroom battles. But as the years went on, Evelyn faded into a distant, bittersweet memory. Her voice, her scent, her kindness, all tucked away, behind walls he built for survival. When his parents died in that plane crash, Evelyn was nowhere to be found. Tyler didn't question it. He was too buried in grief, in responsibilities, in expectations. Suddenly, he wasn't just the boy in the shadows. He was the Empire's heir, the man everyone expected to become ruthless and brilliant, and so he became exactly that. He climbed faster than anyone expected. He made headlines, closed deals, became the man his father would have envied. But at night, when he stood in penthouses, looking out over cities he barely recognized, something always felt missing, a presence, a voice, a laugh that felt like sunlight. And then, years later, in a rundown diner far from glass towers and corporate suites, he saw her again. But she wasn't wearing her usual cardigan. She wasn't reading stories to a child. She was holding a tray, wiping tables, and smiling through exhaustion. That's when everything inside Tyler shifted. Because the one person who had made him feel like he mattered had been left behind, and this time he wasn't going to ignore it. The diner was nothing like the places Tyler frequented. No polished floors or ambient jazz, no curated lighting or art on the walls. The paint was chipped, the neon sign buzzed weakly, and the scent of burnt coffee lingered in the air. It was the kind of place you'd pass without a second glance. But for Tyler Blackwell, it might as well have been the center of the universe. He had only walked in to escape the rain, or so he told himself. But truthfully, he'd been drawn by something else, something unexplainable. And then he saw her. There, beneath flickering lights and stained ceiling tiles, moved the woman who once meant everything to him. Evelyn Harper. Her steps were slower, her back slightly hunched from years of unseen burdens. Her hair was pulled back in a tired bun. The lines on her face had deepened, but her eyes were exactly the same, hazel, warm, and unknowingly radiant. Tyler slipped into a booth, heart thudding. He waited, watched as she balanced mugs and plates with practiced grace. She smiled at customers, but he could see the exhaustion behind it. She looked thinner, her hands rougher, a quiet grace wrapped in hardship. He waited for the dinner rush to slow, then raised his hand. "Excuse me," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Evelyn turned. For a moment, she was just another tired server responding to a customer. Then her eyes met his. She froze. The tray in her hand wobbled. A mug clattered to the floor, spilling lukewarm coffee across faded linoleum. "Tyler," she breathed, the sound of his name from her lips. It unraveled something in him. Memories, emotions, 1,000 unspoken words surged forward. He nodded slowly. "It's been a while." She set the tray down with trembling fingers. Her voice, fragile and disbelieving, asked, "What are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing." Tyler replied gently, gesturing to the cafe. He tried to mask the shock in his tone, not wanting to offend. This isn't... how are... You here? Her expression shifted. The brief spark of reunion dulled behind a wall of guarded emotion. Life, Tyler. It's complicated. She glanced at the old clock on the wall. My shift ends in 10. Meet me outside. He nodded, not trusting his voice. As he waited beneath, the awning, rain still misting the air, memories came rushing back like a flood. Her laugh, her lullabies, the smell of cinnamon cookies she used to sneak him. She was his anchor, his family, and he had let her drown in silence. Then she stepped out, pulling a threadbare jacket tight around her shoulders. Under the soft glow of the street lamp, she looked older, but still unmistakably Evelyn, the one who had taught him how to be human. She crossed her arms and leaned against the brick wall. So, she said, raising an eyebrow. What's a billionaire doing in a place like this? Tyler's throat went dry. I was in the area for a meeting. Saw you through the window. Then more honestly. Evelyn, what happened? Her shoulders tensed. Her voice cut like frost. You don't get to show up after 14 years and ask that like it's small talk. I'm sorry, Tyler whispered. I didn't know. I need to know. Evelyn sighed. Her breath fogged in the cold air. When you left for college, your family fired me. No notice, no explanation. One day I was raising you. The next I was told never to come back. Tyler flinched. They fired you? Why didn't you tell me? I tried, she said, voice cracking. I wrote. I called your office. Your assistant told me you were too busy. Eventually, I gave up. The words crushed him. He had been so consumed with ambition, with running the empire his parents left behind, that he had ignored the one person who had never once ignored him. And now, she was here, still standing, still surviving. But the cost was far more than he ever imagined. Tyler barely slept that night. Evelyn's words replayed over and over in his mind like a looped broadcast he couldn't turn off. She had written to him, called him, reached out through the noise and weight of his new world, and he had missed it all. Or worse, ignored it. But what haunted him wasn't just the fact that she'd been let go. It was the way she'd said it. Like she had been erased, not just dismissed. By morning, Tyler canceled his meetings, pushed back the launch of a new tech division, and drove back to the diner. He wasn't there for redemption. He was there for the truth. Evelyn was finishing up the breakfast rush when she spotted him. This time, she didn't look surprised. Just tired. He waited until she could sit with him, their booth tucked in. The corner felt like neutral ground. I've been thinking about what you said, Tyler began, eyes locked on hers. And I can't shake the feeling that there's more. Evelyn looked away, fiddling with her napkin. Why does it matter now? Because you mattered to me. You still do. She didn't respond right away. Then slowly she exhaled. They didn't just fire me, Tyler. They made sure I couldn't work again. His blood ran cold. What do you mean? She hesitated. After I was let go, your father's lawyer, Grayson, started making calls. Agencies stopped returning. Mine. Rumors began to spread that I'd stolen from the family, that I was unstable, unreliable. Tyler stared, unable to breathe. In the weeks that followed, Tyler made the hardest decision of all. He resigned as CEO of Blackwell Enterprises. He didn't hold a press conference. He didn't make a speech. He simply left his office, passed the title to a successor who shared his vision, and walked into a future of his own design. He joined Harper's Hope full-time, not as a figurehead, but as Evelyn's partner. They worked side by side, expanding the foundation's reach, pushing for systemic change, and making sure no one else would be silenced the way she had been. Their relationship was no longer defined by titles. Not nanny and child, not billionaire and employee. They were a family now, and every project they launched was a promise that dignity could be restored, that pain could lead to purpose, and that love, unselfish, unwavering love, was the greatest wealth of all. It was a quiet evening, a full year after Harper's Hope had opened its first center. Tyler and Evelyn sat at a picnic table in a small community garden behind the newest facility. The laughter of children echoed in the distance, their voices dancing through the wind like music. Volunteers were finishing up for the day. The scent of fresh soil and baked bread lingered in the air. Tyler watched Evelyn sip her tea, her eyes soft with something he hadn't seen in her for years. Peace. "You've grown into a good man, Tyler," she said suddenly, breaking the silence. He looked over, caught off guard. "I had the best teacher." She smiled and reached across the table, gently squeezing his hand. "You didn't just give me a job, you gave me a reason to keep going. You gave me back my name. And you," he said, voice thick with emotion, "gave me back my soul." They sat in silence for a moment, surrounded by the very thing they had created together. Not with money, but with intention, with sacrifice, with love. Behind them, a plaque glinted in the last light of the day. It read, "Harper's Hope Community Center, built on courage, grown through love." Tyler turned his gaze toward it, reflecting on the journey that had led them here. For so long he had believed that power was everything, that status, deals, and numbers were the measure of success. But none of it mattered now. Not really. He thought of the mansion he had grown up in, the sterile silence, the loneliness in polished hallways. None of it had taught him how to be human, but Evelyn had. She taught him that love isn't about presence on paper, but presence in pain. That family isn't who shares your blood. It's who stays when everyone else leaves. And most of all, she taught him that real wealth isn't written on a check or stored in offshore accounts. It's found in quiet redemption, in restored dignity, in the lives you lift when no one's watching. As twilight fell, Tyler knew that this was the true inheritance he'd been looking for. Not his parents' empire, but the movement he and Evelyn had built with open hearts and steady hands. This wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of a new one, where the past no longer held them down, and the future was a garden of hope blooming with every soul they helped along the way.